Tunnels, metro, underground systems, and even secret passageways to the houses of the rich and famous. Why else do we need tunnels, you may wonder? To hide. Many cities have underground tunnels and even underground doppelgangers. Now let's make it clear. Those passages are normally not connected, contrary to the popular rumor claiming that it was possible to get from Scotland to Turkey using underground passageways built around 5,000 years ago. I mean, it sounds insane even today. Imagine building it back in the day. These tunnels have an official name, the Erdstall Tunnels, and they were most likely built in the Middle Ages. However, we still don't have the exact information about the date. The highest concentration of those tunnels are in Bavaria, Germany, but there are many of them in Great Britain and France too. Erdstall tunnels, a unique type of earthen passage found globally, are characterized by their narrow, oval-shaped corridors and tight choke points, known as schlups, or slip-outs. Despite speculation, their purpose remains a mystery. However, some of those tunnels have fireplaces and even vents, which might mean those were used primarily for shelter. Dating back to the Middle Ages, possibly as early as the 12th century, Erdstall tunnels lack archaeological signs and historical records, so it's not a surprise that there are many rumors about their use. Some scientists are sure those were storage spaces, though their narrowness makes this impractical. Another idea is that they provided hiding spots for farmers during tribal raids. However, their single entry point raises doubts about their effectiveness in evading threats. Now, if you're feeling like Indiana Jones and want to venture into those tunnels, you're in luck. A few structures, like the Erdstall Radkobluken in Austria, welcome visitors to explore these enigmatic structures. Most of them are closed to the public eye, though. The origins of Erdstall tunnels remain largely unknown, just like their real functions. And if you think, hey, it's the 21st century here, we can study pretty much everything, well, you're wrong. What makes these tunnels hard to study are the tight confines. Traditional surveying methods often prove inadequate in such spaces. To solve this problem, scientists use a handheld device that integrates an RGB camera, a gyroscope, and high-resolution depth sensors, allowing them to capture intricate details of the tunnels. They also use modern techniques like 3D surveying in hopes of uncovering the true origins and purposes of those tunnels. One hypothesis even suggests they may have been poorly conceived dwellings, abandoned when their inadequacies became apparent. Still, not everyone quite agrees with this idea. Other theories suggest they served spiritual purposes, while the most intriguing idea speculates that those tunnels may be remnants of extraterrestrial civilizations. Experts believe they may have been used for practical matters, such as granaries or hiding spots from looters. As we don't have exact info on who built it and when, it may be pretty much anyone, even a sloth. Nope, I'm not a lunatic. Sloths can build giant tunnels. Check this out. In 2009, a farmer in southern Brazil was driving his tractor through a cornfield when it suddenly sank into the ground. He quickly discovered he had broken through the top of an underground tunnel. When researchers came to investigate, they found a tunnel around 6.5 feet high and the same 6.5 feet wide, extending about 50 feet long, right beneath the farmer's house. When they looked closer, they instantly saw deep claw marks on the walls. That was the proof the tunnel wasn't human-made. So that thing the farmer uncovered was a megafauna paleo burrow, a prehistoric tunnel dug by ancient creatures like giant ground sloths or giant armadillos from over 10,000 years ago. I know, it's hard to imagine those beasts, but let me help you. Take a hamster. Now, increase it to the size of an elephant. Don't forget, this 13-foot-tall hamster could also walk on two legs. During their time, around 15 million to 10,000 years ago, many species of sloths and giant armadillos roamed the Americas, some even digging similar tunnels. Today, many of these tunnels are filled with sediment, though some remain clear, similar to the one the farmer discovered. This 2009 find sparked significant interest, leading to the discovery of over 1,500 paleo burrows across southern Brazil, making it the area with the highest concentration of such sites worldwide. But no one knows exactly why there are so many of them in southern Brazil. While some paleo burrows exist throughout South America, none have been found in North America, which is weird since those huge sloths roamed the entire continent. The exact purpose of these large tunnels remains a mystery, but scientists believe they may have served as nursing spaces, temperature regulation, or hibernation areas. Tunnels likely developed over centuries as successive generations of sloths and armadillos expanded them. Now, let's take a look at fugus. No, not the Japanese fatal delicacy, and no, not a town in New Guinea. To see them, we gotta travel to the UK. So fugus are underground structures too, but they don't look exactly like tunnels. They are dry stone structures. They look as if a cave had been decorated with stones from the inside. There are only around 15 of them found so far, and most of them are located in Cornwall. According to the estimates, those tunnels were built about 2,400 years ago, and they're still in pristine condition, which is truly fascinating. I mean, back in the day, people had no cool machinery whatsoever, yet their structures still last. And if you dare to buy an apartment today, well, chances are you won't be too happy about the quality. Going back to our fugus, there's nothing extraordinary about their supposed purpose. They could be used for spiritual purposes, as a place to hide, or a food storage. The latest application, though, is a bit weird. I guess it's not a secret for anyone that England is famous for its excessive humidity. And if you want to store your food properly, you gotta avoid the humidity at all costs. Otherwise, say welcome to mold and fungi. But ancient people weren't dull-witted at all, or they wouldn't have survived, and you and I wouldn't be around now. So they might have adapted those fugus to store just some products, those that already had natural molds in them, assisting in the preservation of perishable food, like milk, butter, and cheese. But hey, those are just speculations. The true reason why they were built remains unknown. What makes fugus unique is that they are intentionally built tunnels, not just excavated mines like those in Wales. They were crafted by digging deep trenches, lining them with stone slabs, covering them with capstones, and then filling over them, all of which took significant time and effort. Still, no matter how hard those were to construct, cities around the globe are often built over intricate tunnel systems, each unique to its location. For instance, Paris is famous for its extensive underground quarries, which were abandoned years ago, but still pose a risk of collapse in certain areas above. London boasts one of the largest tunnel networks in the world, including many that were specifically created for military purposes. In New York City, there are rumors of secret tunnels, while Los Angeles has old tunnels from the Prohibition era used for speakeasies. Many other cities also have their share of enigmatic tunnels, and surprisingly, Florida is no exception. It happened in the year 2011 in Ybor City. Near a former post office, flooding uncovered something weird, a section of an unknown structure. Back then, people didn't pay much attention to that, so it took another 7 years to discover something truly fascinating. This historic neighborhood was founded in the 1880s, but it remained unknown until 2018 that it also has a hidden tunnel network. We only learned of it because of renovation work. The exact purpose, of course, is unknown, but most scientists are pretty sure that they serve to connect to early gaming spots and the port of Tampa. Figuring out how extensive the tunnel network is tricky. In 2018, a historic home in Seminole Heights revealed locked doors leading to tunnels from the 1920s. One local even said he traveled through a tunnel for 20 minutes. Rumors suggest some tunnels connect to the Hillsborough River and Ybor City. Research is ongoing, but no new info has emerged yet.
So, you've just finished your sightseeing tour of Edinburgh, Scotland, or Scotland. It lasted just under an hour, and you're hungry for more. You ask your guide if there's anything else to see, and they start talking about a mysterious underground city. You ask how long it takes to get there, and you're shocked by the guide's answer. You're standing on it. It's right under your feet. South Bridge? But you were just there and didn't notice a giant arrow pointing down. So this is where the mystery starts. The story begins in the mid-1700s. The Scottish capital wasn't as big as it is today. Only 60,000 people lived around Edinburgh Castle. All of them were packed inside medieval walls, and they say today's cities are overpopulated. Get a load of the living conditions back then. The buildings were tall, so there was little natural light. Some houses had 14 stories. Cows walked the narrow winding streets and left stuff. Things were so bad that the famous English writer Daniel Defoe noted, "I believe that in no city in the world so many people have so little room." Yep, that's the guy who wrote Robinson Crusoe. Well, something just had to be done. The solution was to build 2 long bridges to the north and to the south of the city. The names they gave the bridges were more descriptive than colorful. The bridge to the north was completed first. In 1785, construction on the second bridge got underway. It was going to connect the main pedestrian street in the north with the university buildings in the south of Edinburgh. But don't think of this construction as a modern bridge over a river. It was more of a viaduct, a type of bridge that connects 2 hills across a valley. The word viaduct comes from Latin, as Romans were pioneers in building these structures. Their capital was built on 7 hills. And just to be copycats, Edinburgh also straddled 7 major hills. Only 2 are visible today because the city has been built up. Now, back in the 18th century, the construction of the South Bridge was a remarkable feat of engineering. It took the builders only 3 years to complete it. 19 stone arches spanned a chasm that was 31 feet at its deepest point, and the length over 1,000 feet. Impressive, even for today's standards. But what does a 2.5 centuries old viaduct have to do with an underground city? Well, it is the city. You see, they designed Southbridge to be hollow on the inside. As you walk along this street today, there is actually a huge human-made cave beneath your feet. The popular name for this set of chambers is the Edinburgh Vaults. But what was the purpose of this space? And is there something or someone there now? Well, let's take it one step at a time. The builder's original intention was for these vaults to serve as merchant shops. At first, it worked out fine. Merchants used a total of 120 vaults as shops and warehouses. There were workshops, cobblers, and taverns. But as time went by, a major design flaw came to light. The stone was leaking, and the vaults were damp all the time. There was even flooding. The builders forgot to waterproof the structure. The merchants feared the water would damage their precious goods. After just a couple of years, the first tenants started moving out. Once legal trade moved away from the vaults, the city's poor moved in. And not only them, but all sorts of shady characters. Historians don't know much about this period, since there are no written records. But even the squatters had to leave soon. If you couldn't do business in these vaults, how could you live in them? It was damp and cold, and there was no ventilation, sanitation, or natural light. It really stunk. Every real estate agent's worst nightmare. Just 30 years after their completion, the Southbridge vaults were abandoned once and for all. But at a street level, business was as usual. The officials decided to fill the vaults with rubble for security purposes. Buried and forgotten, the memory of a once teeming merchant quarter of Edinburgh slowly faded from people's minds. Now, this is where the story gets a bit weird. During the 1980s, a Scottish rugby player accidentally found a tunnel leading into the vaults. The athlete didn't waste any time and started excavating the vaults with the help of his son. Several tons of rubble, and a decade later, the Southbridge vaults have been restored to their former glory, so to speak. They were again dark and damp, as they were back in the 1700s. There were many interesting finds in this underground city. The vaults were littered with oyster shells, which were the standard diet for a working-class resident of Edinburgh at the time. Other finds, such as shoes and empty bottles, suggested that people actually lived in these claustrophobic vaults. Think of this the next time you see someone trying to rent their garage as an apartment. So, your guide was right. There really is a hidden city under the streets of Edinburgh. Well, at least one street. You have now gone down from the main pedestrian street into Cowgate. You look up and there it is, the only visible arch of the once impressive bridge. You are now searching online to book a tour of the vaults. You just have to see this place with your own eyes. But the Scottish capital isn't the only city with a mysterious underground. The historic region of Cappadocia in central Turkey hides no less than 36 cities beneath the ground. The biggest and the most impressive one wasn't discovered until 1963. It was built during the Byzantine era to protect the local population from invaders. We have similar structures made out of concrete in our cities, but the level of the Turkish underground city is really impressive. There are several levels, like in a multi-story car garage. The caves and tunnels lie 197 feet underground. That's 2/3 of the Statue of Liberty's height. The city could house 20,000 people at any given time, complete with livestock and food. The smell. Anyway, 20,000 is the average attendance at Major League Soccer matches today. You might want to add a field trip to one of these places the next time you go to Turkey. Most of these cities in Cappadocia can be found in rural areas. Makes sense, right? After all, they were dug out as hiding places. But in Europe, there is one city whose underground labyrinth resembles the vaults of Edinburgh. You've probably heard of Pilsen in the Czech Republic. But hold on a second, this isn't going to be a story of the most famous local product, something brewed perhaps? It's the story of a medieval city that survived underneath the streets of Pilsen. Water wells, cellars, and passageways stretch for more than 12 miles. Merchants and craftspeople used Pilsen's historical underground for storage. Water, food, ice, you name it. The waterworks are pretty impressive. Historians estimate that 360 wells are located under Pilsen's historical town center. In times of instability, the passageways served as safe havens for the locals. They definitely didn't go thirsty down there. Today, most tourists visit these mysterious underground cities. But in Canada, there's one where people live and work. The construction of Montreal's underground city began in 1962. The initial idea was to shelter traffic. That's a nice way to say that city officials were building a metro station. The idea caught on and the project expanded. Now, it's a real-life urban maze hidden under the downtown area. Need a place to stay? There are hotels down there. Want to grab a bite? Step into one of the underground restaurants. Multiple shops, a library, cinemas, the list is long. There are even residential complexes. But how can people live under the ground? Simple. Although the city itself lies beneath the earth, the access points are at ground level. You can enter the 20-mile-long tunnel network at more than 120 places. Oh, that's another place down under. Oops, sorry, Australia.
Scientists discovered the largest water reservoir in the Oregon Cascades. It's hiding underground, holding more than twice the water volume of Lake Mead. Let me specify. It contains at least 19.4 cubic miles of water, which is almost 162 trillion bottles of water. If you drank one bottle a day, it would take you around 444 billion years to finish your stock. No wonder this underground aquifer discovery is so awesome. The Cascade Mountain Range, which contains the largest aquifer on Earth, stretches about 700 miles from Northern California to British Columbia. The high Cascades in Oregon have younger volcanic rocks, around 8 million years old. The Western Cascades are much older, 45 million years. They boast deep canyons and valleys. Scientists study the transition zone between these two areas to understand how water moved through volcanic rock and how volcanic processes had evolved over time. In the process, researchers measured rock temperatures at different depths. That's when the underground aquifer discovery happened. Normally, deeper rocks should be hotter because it's closer to the Earth's interior. But, to everyone's surprise, in several areas, the temperature stayed the same even at greater depths. Well, this was a strong clue that water was flowing through the rock and cooling it down. In other words, the Cascades function like a natural water tower, storing and slowly releasing water into rivers and streams. These geological water findings are important for two main reasons. First, it's our potential water source for the future. Such a massive amount of water stored underground could be an important resource. So far, we don't know how long it will remain in its current state and how resilient it's going to be to changes. So, we need more research to properly manage its use. Secondly, it affects volcanic activity. When water seeps deep underground and reaches magma, it instantly turns into steam, creating extreme pressure that can trigger explosive volcanic eruptions. Understanding how much water is stored in volcanic rock could help predict future eruptions and the risks they pose. Now, even though this discovery is exciting, there are still many unanswered questions. Like, how does this water move through the volcanic rock? Or how much of it is actually usable as a water resource? Since this underground reservoir depends on rain and snow, a series of dry years could cause big problems for both water supply and volcanic stability. Researchers are now working to understand the full impact of the Cascades volcanic water reservoir and how to manage it responsibly. But let's look closely at the geological wonder that is the Cascade Range. Picture this: a massive mountain range stretching all the way from Northern California up to British Columbia, cutting right through the middle of Oregon. That's the mountain range we're talking about. In Oregon alone, it's about 260 miles long and up to 90 miles wide, covering 17,000 square miles. Whoa, that's bigger than each of the 9 smallest US states. The coolest thing is that the Oregon part of this mountain range is basically built by volcanoes, and apparently contains at least one volcanic rock water storage. The range itself exists because of something called the Cascadia Subduction Zone, where the Juan de Fuca tectonic plate, a chunk of Earth's crust under the Pacific Ocean, is slowly getting shoved beneath North America. As it sinks, the intense heat and pressure force water out of the oceanic rock. It lowers the melting point of the surrounding mantle and creates magma. That magma rises up and fuels the Cascade volcanoes. This is part of the Ring of Fire, the giant belt of volcanoes circling the Pacific. So, in a way, the Cascades are part of a much bigger volcanic system that's constantly shifting and changing. The Oregon Cascades are actually made up of 2 completely different zones, the Western Cascades and the High Cascades, and they look nothing alike. The Western Cascades are the older part. They formed around 45 million years ago. These mountains are rugged and deeply carved up by rivers. Some canyons are as deep as 3,700 feet. This part of the range used to be volcanically active, but over time, erosion has taken over, reshaping the land. The High Cascades, on the other hand, are much younger and way less eroded. Around 8 million years ago, the volcanic activity shifted, and new eruptions filled in old canyons, smoothing out the landscape. Eruptions kept piling up fresh lava, and rivers in this region didn't have as much time to create deep valleys like they did in the Western Cascades. That's why if you look at the 2 regions side by side, one looks jagged and carved up, while the other looks smoother and more built up. Some of Oregon's most famous volcanoes are located in the High Cascades. I'm talking about Mount Hood, Mount Jefferson, the Three Sisters, and Crater Lake, which actually formed when Mount Mazama erupted and collapsed in on itself. Unlike smaller volcanoes that pop up, erupt for a bit, and disappear over a few months or years, these giant volcanic centers have been active for thousands of years. And because they've been around for so long, they have way more complex magma systems. They produce everything from basalt, which is a runny, fast-moving lava, to andesite, dacite, and rhyolite. And rhyolite is the type of magma that leads to huge explosive eruptions. So, while some of these volcanoes might just ooze lava, others have the potential for devastating blasts. Another amazing thing about these long-lived volcanoes is that their underground magma chambers stay hot for a really long time. That's why the Cascades are one of the best places to tap into geothermal energy. There's a ton of heat just sitting beneath the surface, waiting to be used. Oh, and don't forget about the Cascades volcanic water reservoir. Who knows how we will use it in the future? Now, we already know that the Cascades are part of the magnificent Ring of Fire, Earth's most explosive zone. Imagine a massive horseshoe-shaped belt wrapping around the Pacific Ocean, stretching for about 25,000 miles. It's one of the most geologically active areas on the planet. This is where Earth's tectonic plates are constantly shifting, colliding, and grinding against each other, creating some of the world's most powerful earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and deep ocean trenches. The Ring of Fire follows the meeting points of multiple tectonic plates, and they all surround the giant Pacific Plate. These plates aren't just sitting still, they're always on the move, pushing against or sliding beneath each other at their boundaries, known as fault lines. When this happens, you get everything from deep-sea trenches to towering volcanoes and violent earthquakes. One of the most extreme examples of this activity is the Mariana Trench, located east of Guam. At 7 miles deep, it's the deepest ocean trench on Earth. It was formed by a process called subduction, where one tectonic plate is forced beneath another, sinking deep into the Earth's mantle. The Mariana Trench is one of the most mysterious places on Earth. It's insanely deep, with crushing pressure and total darkness. So for a long time, people thought nothing could live down there. But it turned out that life existed even at the very bottom. In 2005, scientists found a tiny single-celled organism in the Challenger Deep, the deepest part of the Mariana Trench. They also came across colorful rocky formations and weird sea cucumbers. The Mariana Trench also has hydrothermal vents, which are basically underwater hot springs. Even though the water there is super hot and acidic, strange creatures and microscopic life forms still manage to survive there. The Ring of Fire is also responsible for 90% of the world's earthquakes. Some of the most powerful quakes in history have happened here, including the 1960 Valdivia earthquake in Chile, the strongest ever recorded, which hit a mind-boggling 9.5 on the Richter scale. But it's not just about earthquakes. The Ring of Fire is also home to about 75% of the planet's volcanoes. Some of the most famous eruptions in history have come from this region, like the infamous Mount Tambora in Indonesia. In short, the Ring of Fire is one of the most dangerous places on Earth, but it's also incredibly fascinating. Who knows what else scientists might discover in that region, like they discovered the largest water reservoir in the Cascades.
Humans invest a lot of time and money exploring the unknown. First outer space, then the ocean floor. But there's another frontier we're trying to conquer. Scientists call it the deep frontier. I'm talking about how far down to the Earth's core we've made it so far. During the 60s, humans tried digging the deepest man-made hole on Earth. This took us deep into the Arctic Circle. What later became known as the super deep borehole is also the deepest artificial point on Earth, reaching the depth of 40,230 feet. It took 20 years to drill this far into the Earth's crust, and researchers say this is only about 1/3 of the way through to the mantle. Here's a quick anatomy of our planet. If the Earth is like an onion, the crust is like the thick skin of this onion. This part is only 25 miles thick. Beyond this is the 1,800-mile deep mantle, and after that, right at the center of the Earth, is the core, which is made up of 2 layers, inner and outer. Now, can you guess where on the planet the crust is at its thinnest? on the ocean floor. When American scientists understood that, they started drilling holes on the seabed. This gave way to Project Mohole. It began in 1961, but their technology to drill deep holes on the ocean was really bad. They had to improvise. They installed a system of propellers along the sides of their drill ship to keep it steady over the hole. The main challenge was to drill as vertically as possible. Otherwise, that deep hole would look more like a deep maze. Both the Kola Super Deep Borehole project and the Project Mohole came to an official stop in the years that followed. But hey, humans have built some pretty deep stuff underground. In 1963, a Turkish man took a swing with his sledgehammer to improve his basement and discovered a tunnel. That tunnel entrance led to more openings that connected a multitude of halls and chambers. He didn't know it, but he had discovered Derinkuyu. This once lost city was up to 18 stories tall and 200 feet deep. The city was large enough to host 20,000 people, and it was simply standing beneath Cappadocia in Turkey the whole time. Cappadocia hosts hundreds of subterranean dwellings. 40 of these underground cities are at least 2 stories high, but none of them are as huge as Derinkuyu. There's not a lot of historical accounts of how Derinkuyu was born. Some speculate that the oldest part of the complex was dug about 2000 BCE by the Hittites. The Hittites were an Indo-European civilization who formed one of the first major civilizations of the Bronze Age in West Asia. Scholars think they built this underground city to protect themselves from invasion. Others think it was actually the Christians who built the city in the 1st century CE. They speculate that it could have been constructed to protect people from the intense temperature variations, extreme heat in summer and freezing cold in winter. Geographically, the terrain under Cappadocia is great for building. The rocks are soft, which makes tunneling easier. For that same reason, opening large caves underground is fragile. That's why most chambers have pillars that support them. On the bright side, and we are, none of the floors at Derinkuyu have ever collapsed. The builders of Derinkuyu thought of everything. The city was shut off from the world by huge rocks that hid its entrance. It was ventilated by a total of more than 15,000 shafts, around 10 centimeters wide. This way, they guaranteed enough breathing air in the upper levels in a way that they ended up being used as the living and sleeping quarters. The lower levels of this impressive maze were mainly used for storage. But honestly, they had it all. A room for a wine press, for domestic animals, small religious buildings. They certainly didn't spare any efforts to make that underground city as complete as an above-ground one. Now, speaking of impressive underground stuff, Switzerland has the longest tunnel in the world, built here on the Swiss Alps. This absurdly huge tunnel was built over 8,000 feet below the surface. Check this out. This is what the Gotthard-based tunnel looks like. The first idea to build the tunnel was put forward as early as 1947, but construction only officially began in 1999. It took them years to approve the project and then scout for the perfect location. Even so, the 73 different rock types that compose Massif turned the construction into a real challenge. Some of the rocks were as hard as granite, and others were as soft as sandstone. This meant they needed different approaches and equipment so the whole thing wouldn't crumble down. Overall, they had to excavate about 28 million metric tons of rock to make way for the tunnel. There were many other challenges to build that far into the earth. The deeper into the mountain they got, the hotter the temperatures were. Since there's no natural ventilation, temperatures would get as high as 115 degrees Fahrenheit, making it really hard for workers to endure. The tunnel stretches for 35 miles from one end to the other. During the construction, workers had to use 4 massive tunnel boring machines, aka moles, to penetrate through the massif. Each of these moles was around 1,400 feet long. But that was one of the best things they could do, since these machines limit the disturbance to the surrounding ground and help to produce a smooth tunnel wall. You'd never guess that the world's deepest basement belongs to the Sydney Opera House in Australia. The building goes as deep underground as it grows above ground. But this basement isn't just the Opera House's foundation, it's a parking lot. This unique parking garage penetrates 120 feet underground, or 12 stories deep, while most car parks are only 4 or 5 stories deep. But that's not all that makes it unique. You see, if they decided to build a normal rectangular parking space, this would end up eliminating a bunch of possible parking spaces. And since they wanted to maximize the space they had available, they had to come up with some superb structure. First, they opened up a man-made cavern to make that dream possible. Then they had to come up with a design. That's what led to the donut-shaped cavern, or what engineers call a double helix. This design shocked the engineering community for its innovative approach. But hey, it worked! Today, there is space for over 1,000 cars down there, which seems about right for an opera house. Let's wow once again real quick. Some underground structures may take up to an hour to reach. Take this gold mine in South Africa that lies around 2.5 miles below the surface. Yeah, you may think, hey, it's just a couple of miles, why does it take an hour to get there? But the conditions are hard and it's not for the weak. But Milan Ladina, an Ecuadorian runner, even completed a half marathon there, despite temperatures reaching 104 degrees Fahrenheit, high humidity at 80%, and an atmospheric pressure of 1.4, comparable to what divers experience 5 meters under the sea. Yikes. There you are, trekking across a desert on foot. It's hot, you're terribly thirsty, and now you gotta walk around this stupid wall. Wait, a wall in the middle of a sandy, lifeless nowhere? Exactly, a wall in the northern Saudi desert. Archaeologists have just made a super exciting discovery, and what they found was not just a single wall. No, it was a whole ancient walled city that might date back to 2400 BCE. They think this place was home to around 500 people and could have been used for 1,000 years. This discovery is groundbreaking. It means that the area could have been way more advanced than anyone expected. This city was well organized, with different zones for living, towers and strong walls for protection, and different sections for all kinds of daily life. This ancient city, now called Al-Nata, was basically an oasis town, and it's great since it can give us a peek into what life might have been like in this desert thousands of years ago. Apparently, they had clearly separated areas, like residential sections, a cemetery, farmland, and even a town center. This oasis city, found in the Khaybar area, is the first big organized settlement from the 2nd or 3rd millennium BCE that researchers have uncovered in northwestern Arabia. The first surveys show that this town, which covered about 6 acres, had several districts, including the residential area, the cemetery, and the legal one, with courts. The houses were set up in neat rows, all connected by small roads. Those streets kept the residential area separate from the rest of the town. Back then, most people in this region were nomadic herders, always moving around. But archaeologists have been sure that during the Bronze Age, northwest Arabia had small walled towns and oasis centers scattered across it. These connected oasis towns were unique, offering secure places for people to live, store goods, and trade. They started showing the beginnings of urban planning, which hints that people of that time were already starting to settle down and organize communities more seriously. The research team estimated that there were about 50 homes in Al-Nata, but that number could go up to 70 as they keep digging. They think that a few hundred people lived there, and probably one of the coolest things is that some houses went up to 3 stories tall. Built on a slope near a couple of major trade routes, this city was set up in a prime spot. Now, one of the most impressive things about this place is its water supply. The oasis had springs and aquifers, which are underground water sources, and such conditions were perfect for farming. Those water sources meant residents could grow their own food, making the town self-sufficient. The outer walls probably helped control who could enter the town and get access to its resources. This settled way of life was an impressive shift from nomadic living to a more agro-pastoral lifestyle, which means a mix of farming and herding animals. Another find that supports this theory is a bunch of tools, like grinding stones, mortars, and pestles, discovered inside the town. People there must have ground grains and prepared food. They had a diet of cereals, meat, and milk from animals they raised themselves. These astonishing findings show that the inhabitants of the town could easily feed themselves and were surprisingly advanced for that time. Thanks to better access to Saudi Arabia in the past couple of decades, archaeologists now have a much clearer picture of what life there was like thousands of years ago. The most exciting thing is that Al-Nata might have been part of a whole network of similar fortified oasis towns spread across the region, and all of these connected sites could show us how trade routes and small settlements worked together at that time in that arid area. Now, at the same time, this recent discovery isn't the only one that has the scientific world buzzing with excitement. How about we visit Egypt and see for ourselves? After all, archaeologists have just found a stash of ancient Egyptian and Greek treasure underwater. They were exploring the lost city of Thonis Heraklion off the coast of Egypt, which sank more than 1,000 years ago. This city was legendary, and nobody even knew where it was until it was rediscovered in 2000. Now they're uncovering more and more, and on this dive, they found a pile of gold and silver treasures. Those were probably used in rituals to bless Egyptian pharaohs when they took the throne. The researchers even found an ancient Greek temple dedicated to Aphrodite and some super-old Greek weapons. Frank Gotthard, the lead archaeologist, said it was astonishing that those delicate objects had survived the disaster that brought the city down. Back in its prime, Thonis Heraklion was one of the biggest port cities in the Mediterranean. It was a huge center of social life and was the main entry point for ships from Greece coming into Egypt. But tragically, due to rising waters, earthquakes, and a catastrophic tidal wave, the soil underneath the city literally turned into mush, and then the entire city sank into the Mediterranean. It was forgotten until Gaudiyo's team found it in 2000. Since then, they've been uncovering new parts of the city and piecing together its history little by little. If a lost underwater city doesn't seem impressive enough, we can travel to the Amazon. The discovery made there is truly mind-boggling. For centuries, people have talked about lost cities deep in the Amazon, like El Dorado, that mythical city of gold that lured Spanish explorers into the jungle. A lot of them never came back. Then, in the 1900s, a British explorer named Percy Fawcett went searching for what he called the lost city of Z, and he too disappeared. But now, finally, scientists have actually found proof that those lost cities in the Amazon were real all along. A team of scientists use a tech called LiDAR, which basically allows you to see through thick jungle from above by bouncing light beams off the ground. They flew over the jungle in Bolivia in a helicopter about 650 feet up and mapped out those hidden ancient cities. What they found were ruins of a huge urban settlement built by the Kasarabi people who lived there from 500 to 1400 CE. And it wasn't just a couple of buildings here and there. No, the LiDAR maps revealed massive urban centers, pyramids, platforms, roads, canals, and causeways, all carefully laid out. Turns out the Amazon wasn't just an untouched jungle. It was once home to big, complex cities. A scientist from the German Archaeological Institute explained that Europeans had long ignored the possibility of ancient Amazonian cities, but the LiDAR maps showed they were wrong. The new maps have revealed 26 sites, including 11 that no one even knew existed. Researchers have discovered two main city sites, Landivar and Kotoka. They had massive moat causeways stretching out like spokes on a wheel, linking the main cities with smaller surrounding settlements. Some of the canals even connected the cities to rivers and a big lake, which allowed water to flow through the area. Over the years, scientists found scattered ruins all over this region, but the thick jungle made it nearly impossible to connect the dots and see if or how they were related. With LiDAR, the whole layout came to life, showing that those sites were part of a much larger organized urban system. It's now also clear that the sites had a greater meaning, since everything is lined up in a way that could be symbolic of the spiritual beliefs of the inhabitants. The Kasarabi culture isn't as famous as the Maya, but they had a thriving society in an area that faced huge challenges, like yearly flooding. And although the nearby Andes had their own monumental sites, the Kasarabi were doing something absolutely unique. They even had reservoirs to store water, which suggests they might have been dealing with occasional droughts, which is pretty unusual for the Amazon. Actually, those terrible droughts could be why the Kasarabi eventually left their cities around 1400 CE. Now, let's assume that another species, whether humanoid or dolphin-like, could have existed millions of years ago. How do we find their traces? There was a Doctor Who episode about a non-human industrial civilization on Earth that existed long before us. These reptiles, called Silurians, were forced deep underground by a catastrophic rise of temperatures on Earth, and there they thrived for centuries. That inspired scientists to create the so-called Silurian hypothesis. If there was an advanced civilization before us, we should find their traces somewhere. Well, let's try. Climatologist Gavin Schmidt and astrophysicist Adam Frank decided to dive into this themselves. Like us, any technologically advanced civilization would be hungry for energy. So they looked for global effects that would leave a widespread mark. For example, hints of large-scale industrial processes, like plants and factories, and their leftovers. Then comes the question of how long these civilizations would last. If they existed for a long time, we should look for long-lasting signs, like residues from burning fossil fuels, mass extinctions, synthetic chemicals not found in nature, and even traces of nuclear fission. Basically, we should search for the same kinds of things that humans are currently leaving behind as evidence of our activities. Unfortunately, this evidence isn't that easy to find. Let's imagine an unsettling scenario if humanity suddenly disappeared. Even though it seems like we've left a lot of changes on our planet, the future civilization millions of years from now would struggle to find any remnants of our existence. Why? Well, our planet has existed for 4.5 billion years. Complex life on Earth has existed for more than 400 million years. Compared to that, our industrial period only lasted around 300 years, and we haven't left any significant traces. Our record of Earth's history is full of gaps, especially the further back you look. The fossil record captures only some things, being very selective and incomplete. On average, one fossil emerges every 10,000 years, and dinosaur footprints are even rarer. Mountains rise, oceans change, and plate tectonics can easily wipe out evidence of entire civilizations. After a couple of million years, chances are any physical signs of a civilization would disappear. In order to find at least something, we have to look for things like odd sediment patterns or unusual isotopic ratios. Also, fossils mostly form in water, leaving us in the dark about creatures on land or in the jungles. So even if there was a technologically advanced society millions of years in the past, and even if they were far more advanced than us, we might struggle to find any clues of its existence. Frank and Schmidt try to understand how we could ever hope to spot signs of them. Discovering actual cities would be the ultimate proof of a Silurian-style civilization on Earth. But Adam Frank isn't too optimistic. Even now, our cities cover less than 3% of the surface, making it easy to miss ancient city ruins. Whether a city survives over tens of millions of years depends on whether the land around it is sinking, getting locked into a rock, or rising, getting worn away by rain and wind. So, places like the French Quarter in New Orleans might have a better shot of making it into the geologic record than, say, Haight-Ashbury in San Francisco. When it comes to finding artifacts, the odds are pretty slim as well. No prehistoric iPhone would survive millions of years, fancy glass or not. Finding their fossilized remnants might be a bit more promising, but it's still tricky. Considering modern humans have only been around for about 100,000 years, it's quite possible that we might overlook any traces of an earlier advanced species. There is one thing, though. We could stumble upon their traces in rocks. Our current chaotic era might leave a distinct mark on the Earth's geological history, especially since we're basically experiencing PTM 2.0. I'll get to that in a moment. So they try to look at the changes in the carbon cycle. Humans have been releasing a lot of fossil carbon since the 18th century. This leaves a special mark in the carbon isotope ratio, like a signature that shows the difference between carbon in living things, such as seashells, and carbon in lifeless volcanic rock. Scientists also look for signs in the way sediments are arranged. Large coastal deltas might mean that there were bigger rivers made by folks in this hypothetical civilization. Traces of nitrogen could suggest big-scale farming, where they used a lot of fertilizer. Spikes in metal levels in the sediment could mean runoff from heavy industries. Of course, a single find like that wouldn't tell us anything. Schmidt says the key is to look for multiple signs together. Without clear artifacts, the uniqueness of an event might show in various clues rather than a set of changes linked to a single cause. On a quest for Silurian-style clues, scientists even decided to check the moon. Some astronomers find it surprising that no one has looked into this before. They even joked about the possibility of dinosaurs building rockets and leaving traces on the moon or other celestial bodies. These astronomers think that Earth-like planets tend to erase signs of civilizations on their surfaces. So they're exploring the wild notion that these beings might have been space travelers. In that case, remnants of their technology, known as technosignatures, could be lurking not only on our moon but also on asteroids, or even buried on Mars. There they might endure for millions or even billions of years. Unfortunately, so far, despite digging into the past 380 million years and examining all suspicious events, the researchers haven't found a clear match for a technological civilization. They don't give up, though. Frank calls for more investigation. For example, we could study how modern industrial chemicals stick around in ocean sediments. This, he believes, could help us identify similar chemical traces in the Earth's history. If there are no traces, why do we even bother to find something like that? This research is based on Schmidt and Frank's recent papers. They were delving into the Anthropocene. It's the proposed epoch, dominated by human activities on Earth. It's full of these things called hyperthermals. They're prehistoric events when temperatures on Earth sharply increased over a relatively short time. They're like extreme heat waves from the past. A great example of this is the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum, or PETM for short. It happened around 55.5 million years ago and saw a rapid rise in global temperatures. Over 200,000 years, the average temperature on Earth jumped from about 9 to 14 degrees Fahrenheit. We studied these hyperthermals to understand how they occurred, from natural causes or human activities. So, these hyperthermals sparked the genesis of Frank and Schmidt's research. To study them, scientists started examining chemical signals and tracers left in rocks. When doing that, Schmidt and Frank uncovered some eerie parallels between all the climate issues we have today and past periods of rapid temperature shifts. There's a close similarity between the PETM and other hyperthermal events. So all this work isn't just about solving a historical mystery. Understanding our impact on the environment can guide us to finding better ways to live in harmony with the planet and avoid becoming a forgotten species in the future. Our Milky Way is filled with lots of planets that could be just right for life, but we don't know if there are other civilizations out there. Earth is the only place we know of with living beings. About 200 years ago, people wondered if there might be civilizations on Mars. Back then, it was a real question, but once we got pictures from space probes, we decided there wasn't any evidence for it, and that idea got stuck in our minds. Now, it's not even considered a valid topic for serious science. It's seen as kind of silly. But no one has set clear limits on what could have happened on our own planet a really long time ago. So, even if there is no proof, we shouldn't throw away the possibility. Don't forget, it took humanity a while to recognize dinosaurs. Maybe Silurians are just patiently waiting for their time.
Imagine you get to be an archaeologist for the day. You'll travel the world to solve the mystery of long-lost civilizations that disappeared without a trace. Grab your chisel and fedora, and let's go. You arrive at the American Southwest, where an ancient mystery is waiting to be solved. You make your way to Chaco Canyon, just outside of Albuquerque, New Mexico. It's hot and dry in this deserted area. You're here to visit the ancient ruins of the Anasazi people. It's said that they were a thriving civilization that met a mysterious end. You hike a few miles before you begin to make out the shape of dwellings, constructions built of stone in the middle of the canyon. This is Pueblo Bonito, a 10th century complex that contains as many as 800 rooms and stands over 5 stories tall. The buildings are beautiful and made from sandstone. To access the complex, its inhabitants built a 400-mile network of roads, some of them 30 feet wide. You can't wrap your head around the fact that it was built so long ago. Everything looks so well preserved. The Anasazi reigned over the so-called Four Corners region from 100 CE to around 1600 CE. During this time, they built a civilization that sprawled over 30,000 square miles, including Colorado, New Mexico, Utah, and Arizona. Standing inside a huge kiva, an underground ceremonial chamber, you wonder what happened to the Anasazi people. Scientists have analyzed tree rings and found out that the Anasazi population lived through a period of great drought. The drought is believed to have lasted 23 years, and there was possibly no rain at all during this time. This definitely affected their livelihood, from malnutrition to battles over food and resources. But was it enough to make 30,000 people flee their homes? Researchers say these people left their homes with their belongings still in place. Ladles were left in ceramic bowls. Granaries were full of supplies. It was as if they intended to return, but never had the chance to come back. For many years, archaeologists have believed that the drought was the reason for the disappearance of this thriving society. But there's other evidence that shows a different story. Anthropologists say that the ancestral Puebloans, as they are also called, were an exemplary population. They were peaceful and lived together in harmony. But that's not what their architecture shows. They isolated themselves from the rest of the world by building their settlements so high on top of cliffs. And they built walls and other security structures in order to protect themselves. What were they so afraid of? Recently, archaeologists began to study bone fossils of the ancestral Puebloans, and they found evidence that suggests that toward the end of their civilization, things might have gotten pretty bad. Evidence shows that local leaders were ruling using fear-based methods. Severe punishment started to be inflicted on those who did not follow their strict rules. Why this happened is still a mystery, and you might need many other excavation trips to find out the truth. It's lucky that your next destination is really close by. Still in New Mexico, you'll visit the Blackwater Draw. It's a national prehistoric site that holds the story of the Clovis people. You're shocked to find out that the Clovis are possibly the oldest humans to have inhabited the U.S. They were the first humans to allegedly cross the Bering Strait and follow the ice-free trails down to the U.S.'s southern plains. Try to picture what this area looked like when the Clovis people roamed this land. A huge spring-fed lake with mammoths, giant sloths, saber-toothed tigers, and bison much bigger than the ones we have today wandering around. The archaeological site you're visiting shows that the Clovis population were big game hunters. You're able to identify the bones of several mammoths and even the stone tools that our prehistoric ancestors used to hunt them. Some of these date back to 13,000 years ago, aka the end of the last ice age. You're presented with two possible theories on the disappearance of the Clovis population. It's possible that during the final 1,500 years of the last ice age, changes in climate caused a shortage of food. Scientists also believe that this situation was worsened by overhunting. Another theory suggests that a large meteor hit North America, and this was enough to alter the climate and make the Clovis people migrate southward to try to survive. But the truth is, there's no evidence that any of that happened. Next, you'll fly to the Pacific Ocean, to the mysterious Easter Island. This place has left us with many questions, from the building of 13-foot-high face statues to the sudden disappearance of the Rapa Nui people who inhabited the area. You approach the island at Anakina, a white sandy beach on the island's northern shore. Researchers believe this area was one of the first settlements of the Rapa Nui. You could say you're standing at the end of the world, as you're over 3,000 miles away from South America and 1,000 miles away from the nearest island. Around 800 CE, when the first humans arrived, the island was an oasis. Today, the area is mostly deserted. You get your first clue on the fall of the Rapa Nui from an excavation pit you open at the beach. There's clear evidence of human presence: charcoal, tools, and bones, some of them belonging to rats. Bingo! When humans arrived at Easter Island, they brought along rodent companions. They probably didn't know this at the time, but these rodents would contribute largely to their demise. Rats love palm trees, which helped to deforest the natural vegetation of the island gradually over the years. But there's another clue. Looking into genetic data, you discover that South Americans came into contact with the Rapa Nui around 1722. What might have happened to this population is the same that happened to other more isolated groups. The contact with foreign groups brought about diseases that possibly led to the end of the Rapa Nui. To finish off your trip, you're headed to Cambodia. The country was once home to the great Khmer Empire from the 9th century CE to the 15th century CE. The ruins of this place are magnificent. Your main excavation site is the Plains of Angkor, built alongside the Mekong River. This huge site was the most important Khmer city at the time. Just FYI, Angkor actually means capital city in the Khmer language. The Khmer were able to build a huge network of roads connecting Angkor with the rest of the empire. And it's believed that up to 1 million people were spread throughout the Khmer Empire at its peak days. It was the largest pre-industrial city in the entire world. It's comparable in size to modern-day Los Angeles, just so you can get an idea. The Khmers were also master builders and engineers. They managed to build a complex irrigation system that helped their rice farming through the centuries. And to connect their cities, they built almost 500 miles of intricate highways and bridges. Oh, and not to mention the complex architecture of their religious buildings, such as Angkor Wat, one of today's most visited tourist sites in Cambodia. It took over 30 years to build, and it spreads over almost 500 acres. Back in the day, its towers were probably decorated with gold, but today, the site is a maze of vine-covered temples. Like your fellow researchers that came here before you, you're unsure of what caused this civilization to be wiped off the map. One possible guess has to do with the climate in the region. Strong monsoons might have caused massive floods and severe damage to the infrastructure, especially to the water system the Khmer people heavily relied on to survive. But another reason could have been regional conflict and immigration. Toward the end of the 15th century, the empire started to decline in numbers, and this could have weakened its strong power. You might not go home with many answers, but you've certainly learned a lot, huh?